Chapter 1 Dreiden of Mykt. Dreiden pulled the cargo amp out of the arm of the synthetic he was working on. Synthetics were generally nice customers, and unlike most in Mykt, he didn't mind them much. He turned the amp over in his hands, looking at several key components. Sure enough, there was a disjointed piece causing a backfire in the synthetic's cargo program. The amp was supposed to supercharge the limbs and allow for excess weightlifting, but instead, it was reducing the output. Bending the piece back into place, he went to work placing the amp back in the synthetic's arm. While not a complicated fix, it was still something only a licensed mechanic was allowed to do, legally speaking. Work on synthetics was strictly controlled in Mykt, and its citizens were mostly made up of the law-abiding variety. Unfortunately for the synthetics, that meant unfair treatment at times. Mykt politics wasn't something that Dreiden really enjoyed thinking about, so he thought about his customer instead. This synthetic was an older generation model, a PX-22 to be exact. Still able to retrofit with upgrades, but slower in thinking capability and movement. This one was employed as a dock worker, and for every day it was out for maintenance, its pay was being docked. Or at least that's what it had been talking about since he started working. He didn't respond much to the questions asked, other than non-committal grunts or one-word answers. He didn't mind synthetics, but he found that some of the models were rather annoying. This PX-22, for instance, only communicated in electronic beeps and trills. Dreiden could still understand it, but the vocoder gave him a headache. "Okay, I think that's all I can do. Run a diagnostic for me," he said, interrupting the PX-22. He waited for it to reply with another series of chirps and whistles. Green across the board. "Good. Now, as mentioned before, payment will be deducted from your next government check, so no need to worry about it today." It seemed relieved at this. Dreiden was just happy to be paid. After saying goodbye, the PX-22 left. Dreiden, seeing no other customers, headed to the back of his workshop. It's where he liked to spend his time at work when he wasn't entertaining clients. He picked up his current project, something he was designing but didn't fully understand. He was taking a step outside his comfort zone and trying to create a synthetic. It wasn't a big one, as he was restricted by the level of his license, but it was still complicated. He had to account for a personality matrix, and he had never designed one of those before. He was challenging himself in more ways than one. He needed a well-made project for the yearly review, even if it wasn't finished at the time. The Committee of Mechanical Expertise was getting bored with his contraptions, useful as they may be at times. They needed to see that he was trying to keep up with the demand for synthetics in the infrastructure of the city. They were integral to maintaining some of the more delicate or dangerous areas of the city. He looked at his license on the wall, feeling its weight on his shoulders. He had been working at his job for 5 years. 5 long, desperate years of trying to get his work noticed and mainstreamed. If this model he was working on, dubbed XRZ00, turned out in his favor, he could be riding easy on government jobs for the rest of his life. Zzz. His hand jerked back, dropping the lancer he was holding. Ow! Dreiden chastised himself for getting lost in his head, and inspected the damage to both his hand and the XRZ00. A minor electric discharge was usually not a project-ending event, but one couldn't be too careful. He was lucky this time and only suffered a minor sting to his hand. The XRZ00, however, didn't fare as well. There was smoke rising from the prototype personality matrix he had just installed. He took some tweezers and carefully pulled at the latch holding it in place. It fell loose into his palm, and he carefully inspected it. It wasn't fried, per se, but he would have to be on the lookout for quirks. He just couldn't afford the materials for another one at the moment. He sighed heavily, carefully putting the matrix back into place. He put the XRZ00 down gently. "Excuse me." Are you open? A feminine, yet robotic voice said behind him. He flinched slightly. The grainy quality of the vocoder made his ears ache. Yes, ma'am, I am. Technically, a synthetic didn't have a recognized gender, but manners were manners. Laws were laws, but he didn't follow the stupid ones in his own shop. The synthetic in front of him was a high-quality SUSN 22, usually called Susan. She was modeled after a human-blooded female. This one in particular had brown hair and blue eyes. This was a mainstreamed model a few years ago, and likely had access to government resources that could buy any licensed mechanic in the district. Why, then, was she at his shop? I seem to have sustained damage to my vocoder, she said through static. Dreiden twisted a finger in his right ear, trying to get the ringing to stop. All right, just hold on. And please stop talking for a moment. He picked up his handheld computer with its interface port. At least this synthetic could speak fluent Mykt. Probably could speak a few other languages too. I'm going to plug you in so you can communicate on my tablet while I work. She nodded once. Dreiden carefully located the cable underneath her artificial hair, which was surprisingly soft to the touch. He had never worked with such high quality before, though he of course studied the mainstream models extensively, just in case. He savored the moment as he guided the cable to his computer and plugged it in. Information flooded the panel as she started to talk in basic code, the tablet frantically working to translate to Mykt. Will this record our conversation? Apprehension, cold and hard, hit him in the gut. No, not unless I tell it to, which was the truth. I need help. This damage was intentional. My owner did this to me. He told me I was too chatty. Dreiden felt his hands tighten. He didn't appreciate the mistreatment of synthetics, but there wasn't much he was allowed to do, especially if she was still owned by someone. Look, I'm sorry. My hands are tied if you're owned. I can fix you up, give you a different vocoder, or any number of things, but I can't change who bought you. Technically, he could. He knew how, it was just illegal. Without proper ownership transfer paperwork or synthetic retirement papers, which were rare to see, he wasn't allowed to. Doing so was a violation of Article 36C. Improper transfer or emancipation of synthetics by licensed mechanics is subject to termination of the contract for all parties. For mechanics, that meant dismissal from the program and public dishonor. For synthetics, something much worse: reprogram or straight up dismantle. More text scrolled across the screen, translating as it went. I understand. I'm just desperate. He keeps sending me for repairs, and I'm scared he's going to reprogram me. Can't you convince someone to buy you? He asked. Surely someone would want to buy her. If he could afford a SUSN 22, it would make tidying up a lot easier. In general, they're effective maids and houseworkers. I've tried, but he's asking for a high price. 500,000 gold. That's more than I'm even worth. He holds on to me in his greedy palms. Dreiden could see the desperation on her face. Alas, there wasn't anything he could legally do without risking his contract. He shook his head sadly. I'm really sorry, ma'am. Outside of relinquishing ownership, there's nothing that can be done. The SUSN 22 seemed to sag, somewhat defeated. Thank you anyway. An awkward silence settled as Dreiden inspected the vocoder settings and diagnostics. It was reading as faulty and probably needed to be changed. An expensive fix for even a mainstream synthetic. Your vocoder sustained too much damage and needs to be replaced. I normally offer to change the voice with the vocoder, if you so wish. No, I'm fine with what I have, thank you. She seemed withdrawn now. I'm going to open the vocoder casing and remove it. Come back in a couple of days and I'll have a new one built for you. She nodded, letting him access the casing behind her throat cover. He marveled at how lifelike the faux skin felt and was simultaneously perturbed by having to peel it away slightly to access the casing. Using his micro tool, he clicked the security locks in the proper order to disengage them. Then, he slid out the vocoder, which was tinted a dark black and cracked on the front. With the damage all being internal, it seemed her owner peeled back the skin before he hit the vocoder with something. He clicked his tongue in dissatisfaction, his irritation with her owner growing. "I'm sorry you're treated like this," he said quietly. He placed the vocoder down gently. He glanced as text rolled across his screen. "He sends me for more repairs than my allowance can afford. I've been turned away from a couple of businesses because I can't pay up front sometimes." Frustrated, Dreiden decided on something. "Come to me for your repairs, and I'll make sure you're taken care of, regardless of payment." She smiled at him, nodding slightly. He closed the casing and put the skin back in place. He pulled the cable out of his computer and retracted it back up under her hair. Then he motioned for her to stand. "Are you comfortable without your vocoder for a few days?" She nodded, shrugging. No longer able to talk on his computer, she was restricted to using her body language to convey her thoughts. "You can pay when I install your new vocoder, or we can work out an arrangement. It'll be 1,000 gold." He was giving her more than a fair price. He was only making a little on the labor he was putting in. The majority of it was parts, and he wasn't trying to make a profit on those. The SUSN-22 curtsied and turned to walk out the door. He watched her as she went, marveling at the perfect structure of her synthetic form. There was something about the way she moved, almost perfectly like she was human-blooded, that he liked. He watched as the door closed behind her. Now without distraction, Dreiden turned back to his project. The XRZ-00 was in poor shape with the personality matrix the way it was. Maybe with the money coming in from the SUSN-22, he could afford the materials. He'd have to wait and see. Deciding to close up early, Dreiden started cleaning his shop. He carefully put his tools back in place, thoughts turning in his head. He wondered about the SUSN-22 and her infuriating owner. He'd never met a synthetic of her quality and wasn't prepared for how lifelike she was compared to the PX-22, both from the same year but widely different in their design. SUSN-22s were designed for civilian comfort, but the bigwigs slapped a price on them that only government officials could afford. The more basic SUSN-12 was normally found in civilian homes. Regardless, Darhin Jared made a lot of money from his SUSN models. He had whole factories dedicated to his production line. PX-22s, however, were made by Emma Carmine, a lesser-known mechanic. She made basic utility synthetics that were cheap and easy to replace parts on. She only owned one factory after inheriting her father's. Dreiden was closer to her level than Jared's. He put the XRZ-00 back in his safe, keeping it locked away with its schematics and paperwork. He wanted to keep it as safe as possible, so it was biometrically locked. He looked at the closed door for a moment before walking away, his thoughts still on his last synthetic customer. He wanted to do more for her. Maybe he could save up and buy her. 500,000 was a lot, though. He wished he had asked her owner's name, or for that matter, hers, but maybe it was better he hadn't. A possible government official wasn't to be trifled with. In the end, he decided he was doing what he could to help her. He just wished it felt like enough. He hoped she could stay under the radar while she didn't have her vocoder. Her owner sounded downright abusive towards synthetics. He couldn't believe someone would intentionally hurt another being, alive or not. Synthetics blurred the line between living and non-living things. They had thoughts, feelings, desires, and even personality quirks if you didn't regularly maintain their personality matrix. He resolved to talk with her more the next time she was there. He picked up his computer and put in the order for parts to make a vocoder from scratch. He preferred to make his own parts out of basic materials instead of just buying the parts pre-made. It may have been easier, but it was also more expensive. Besides, there was an intimacy to making parts for a client. With that done, he turned to leave his store floor and go upstairs to his room. Tomorrow, he would get up in time to receive his daily order of parts so he could start his work on his client's vocoder. Tonight, he would have dinner and get ready for bed. It had been a long but productive day.